I'm sure even wear the banner with pride, as I do, Irish Sea Border fundamentalist Jim Allister.
Fundamentally against it.
Against it, yes. And the mischief makers over the last week will be devastated to know the country to their spoofs, and that's what they are. There's no division between us whatsoever, none at all. There's no confusion, and we are both very, very clear. We have a unified objective, and that is to restore Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom and to tear down the Union's So we will be continuing to work together in pursuit of those objectives, and anybody trying to sow division or play one off against the other, they're wasting their time, and it's not going to work, because we are united, and as is all unionists who are opposed to the Donaldson deal and the Irish Sea Border. So turning now to some of the more recent developments, I'm sure nobody here will have failed to notice the new interim leader of the DUP trying to walk, or perhaps we'll call it limp back, some of the claims in the Donaldson deal. But of course, Gavin doesn't do this with any conviction, because how could he do it with any conviction? Because it was Big Gavin peering over the top of Jeffrey when he was making all the demonstrably false claims. And let me tell you, demonstrably false that they were. We said they were demonstrably false, and if people didn't want to listen to us, ourselves, at our own expense, with Ben Habib and Kate Dory, secured a legal opinion from Northern Ireland's former Attorney General, the foremost constitutional law expert, who set all of this out and supported the legal analysis that we had set forward. And what did Jeffrey Donaldson, with Gavin peering over his shoulder, say? Uck, it's only an opinion. That was his uck to the former Attorney General. Hope he doesn't need him to defend him in any potential proceedings. And the desperation for a section of the DUP was to return to Stormont, no matter what the price. And see, that objective was not actually to remove the Irish Sea Border, nor to meet their 7 tests, but it was to find a way how they could go back to Stormont and pretend that they weren't implementing the Irish Sea Border, that they hadn't reached their 7 tests. It was actually about implementing it while pretending to be doing the opposite, and that's what they're doing now. And whatever else views I or others may have on him politically, Gavin Robinson's an intelligent man. He's a qualified barrister. He's a pupil of Mr. Justice Schofield, no less. So he simply couldn't have believed what he was saying, because it was so demonstrably false. Nobody who took the time to read the thing, let alone a qualified barrister, could have possibly believed what Jeffrey was saying, and what Gavin, like Big Daddy standing over the top of him, was nodding along, agreeing with. So we've now gone in Gavin's analysis from, you were all told, the unionist community were told, the Irish Sea Border has gone. Each of you will remember that. That's what the DUP told you. You may have listened to Talkback last week. Now the DUP, the Irish Sea Border may be removed, potentially in the autumn. A far cry from it being gone, a far cry from a direction to stop all checks, which was coming. I don't know when it's coming, probably never. And that is overlaid with redefining what the Irish Sea Border is. Think of it, Gavin Robinson's answer when he's asked, is the Irish Sea Border still there, is to say, we'll define what it means. And we'll come along to helping Gavin out with that shortly. But the same way as they redefined Article 6 of the Acts of Union. So now the Acts of Union doesn't mean what it says. It doesn't mean what the words on the page say. It means something else entirely. And how we get to that interpretation, I do not know. So let me provide the answer to Gavin's question. What is the Irish Sea Border? Firstly, it is that which physically represents a border between our country, border control posts and checks. And when the DUP tell all of you, they must think we're all buttoned up the back. When the DUP say there's no Irish Sea Border, it's gone, that's awfully strange, because as it sits now, 192 million is being set aside to build the very Irish Sea Border, which doesn't exist. I think, is it 90? Is it the staff manning the Irish Sea border. 180, I underestimated it. 180 people are manning an Irish Sea border which doesn't exist. What are they doing all day? I mean, I know they used to joke up in the shipyard, people didn't do much work, but goodness me, there's now people manning a border which doesn't even exist. Secondly, that which represents a border in the Irish Sea is Northern Ireland being in a different legal system for goods in the rest of the United Kingdom and subject to EU law. And thirdly, that which constitutionally separates us from the United Kingdom, most egregiously by the subjugation and suspension of Article 6 of the Acts of Union, is the subjugation and disapplication of that foundational constitutional statute. And the best bit of all, the funniest moment in the selling of Donaldson deal was when Jeffrey got up in Parliament and he said, talking about us obviously, how foolish are these people? They say they want to restore Article 6 of the Acts of Union. How silly they are. Who would ever say such a thing? July 2021, I quote Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, "We must restore fully Article 6 of the Acts of Union." Who would say something so foolish indeed, Sir Jeffrey? Until the NIO got a hold of him, and all of a sudden he has U-turned. And what causes the constitutional Irish Sea border? Well, the courts have set that out, so you don't need to listen to Jim or me or even John Larkin. Listen to the courts. 3 things. Northern Ireland being subject to EU law. Not a syllable of EU law has been disapplied. Not a single word of EU law has been disapplied. Administrative burdens on those trading Great Britain to Northern Ireland. So you have to apply for permission to trade in your own country. And thirdly, the so-called Green Lane, which we will come on to in just a moment as well. None of these issues are resolved, nor indeed could be resolved by the Donaldson deal. And to the more specific, ridiculous claims, we've gone from 0 checks and 0 customs paperwork. Remember, that's what you were all told by Sir Jeffrey Donaldson. To, we might have reduced checks in the autumn. That's a far cry from 0 checks. On the Green Lane, that Green Lane which apparently Gavin Robinson and Jeffrey Donaldson told you no longer exists. And the 0 customs paperwork claim has vanished about as quickly as Jeffrey Donaldson himself. And in his last outlandish claim, which was endorsed by the DUP corporately, Jeffrey Donaldson welcomed the Secretary of State taking powers to implement the Irish Sea border. And remember, this is the Jeffrey Donaldson that said, we must have Stormont back because people like us talk about the British government betraying us. Jim Allister, Jimmy Blyson, they say we can't trust the British government. We must get Stormont back to make decisions for ourselves. What did the regulations do? Give all the power to the Secretary of State. Who was the cheerleader for those? Jeffrey Donaldson. The same Jeffrey Donaldson who said we need Stormont back. This man here got legislation passed to allow scrutiny of government ministers. Section 44 of the Northern Ireland Act. Scrutiny of government ministers. What did the regulations do? Take it out. You can't even scrutinise the Secretary of State for the decisions which he makes. And this is what the DUP tell you are somehow a good deal. And anybody who simply reads the legislation last week would understand the legislation gives powers to the Secretary of State to implement the protocol. How then can those same powers be used to dismantle the protocol? They simply cannot. It is a lie, and no other word will do. And then we have Gavin Robinson's own pet claim. The Green Lane is, well, it's going now. It was gone. Now it's going, gone. You know, we'll get there in the end, Gavin. But of course, it hasn't gone anywhere. The Green Lane is essentially a trusted trader scheme. And it's set out, we'll not bore you with the technical details, but if you want to look, it's in a Joint Committee Decision 01/2023. And traders who want to benefit from a simplified version of the Irish Sea border. So, if you understand this, if you're trading from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, by default, you're subject to a full EU border in the Irish Sea. If you want to go down the side door and have a little bit less of the Irish Sea border, you have to apply for authorisation, permission to trade in your own country. Where else in the world would you have to beg for permission to trade in your own country? And what do you have to do to get that permission? And it's in there, Article 9, Paragraph 2, 01/2023. you have to provide information for customs purposes. Not a word of that has been changed by the Donaldson deal. So the DUP have misled you. They have misled all of us. And true it is that some in the party called out that sleight of hand of the century. By the way, that's the DUP's own party chairman who says this is the sleight of hand of the century. If they can't even convince their own party, how shameless that they try and convince everybody else. So next week we'll see, without a whimper of internal opposition, certainly so far, the DUP will accept EU law on the patently absurd basis that this EU law on pet food is similar to that applying in Great Britain. Now think about that for a minute. The DUP's position is now that the way by which we can have similar laws to the rest of our own country is by EU law, not UK law. And this is the same DUP who rejected the Windsor Framework they now accept, saying the fundamental issue was that EU law. And EU law governs Northern Ireland, and the DUP's position seems to be they now no longer object to EU law. They only object if EU law manifests itself in GB to Northern Ireland's divergence. I mean, goodness me, we're far, far away from where we started in all of this. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not this man, it's not me, it's not Ben Habib or Kate Hoey who changed our mind. It's not us who said it wasn't a constitutional issue and then donned the sash and stood on platforms before pivoting back to implementing the Irish Sea border. We have been true and consistent all along. And given we are here in North Down, it's worthy of some brief comment that declared so far in this constituency we have two protocol implementers, Stephen Fry and the Ulster Unionist Party, Colonel Tim Collins. And Mr Collins has nicely stated that should he be elected, he will grace us natives of North Down with his presence by buying a house. Well for him. I'm sure many in working class unionist and loyalist communities who are struggling to heat their homes or feed their families will be delighted to hear this self-described wealth creator will bestow us with his presence by, just like that, buying a house, which presumably wouldn't be his only property. And Colonel Collins, like Doug Beattie, deserves nothing but respect for bravery and courage in their public service in the military. Their sacrifice and commitment for that is beyond question, and for that we owe them great gratitude. But Doug Beattie is a living and breathing example of the reality that a military hero doesn't necessarily fare just as well in politics. And the notion that due to courageous public service in one profession means that by right you're deserving of the evidence in another is fatally flawed and absurd. And would you, or any of you, for example, select Alex Easton, a superb political representative who I would doubt there's barely a person in this hall who he hasn't helped or assisted. But would you select Alex Easton, give him an AK-47 and send him to Afghanistan or over to a war zone? I venture to suggest you would not. So if you wouldn't give Alex Easton an AK-47 and send him to a war zone, why then would you trust Colonel Tim Collins to parachute into Alex Easton's arena? Well, Alex is the man with the trash and we shouldn't. And with respect, Colonel Saunders down the road there at KFC is about as well known in North Down as Colonel Collins. Unionism needs an anti-protocol, anti-Irish Sea border unionist with a track record of serving and living in this community. And there is, in my view, one man who led North Down of the pro-nationalist and pro-Irish Sea border MP who, to our shame, has held elected office, and that man, in my view, is Alex Easton. And I trust that he will step forward to represent unionism, and if he does not, then those opposed to the Donaldson deal and implementation of the Irish Sea border shall have to look at how North Down has the opportunity to have that voice. But I hope, in a personal capacity, I hope that Alex Easton is that man who takes up the mantle and the people of North Down come out behind him. Finally, gentlemen, it's not time to be disheartened. It's really and truly not. It's a time to be cheered. Because the Donaldson deal, which they tried to force down the throat of unionism with the heaviest propaganda campaign imaginable, and with huge efforts to run all over the top of opponents, is falling apart. And even the greatest cheerleaders can no longer stand over it. And it's only going to get worse for them. They tried acceptance of the Irish Sea border, and they have failed. So we're back to where we were between January and May 2021, when Jeffrey Donaldson said the Irish Sea border wasn't a constitutional issue. The DUP tried to accept and to implement the protocol, but it was the grassroots unionist community that forced the DUP to abandon that policy. And mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, so too will the DUP soon have to abandon the Donaldson deal and their Irish-speaking, GAA-playing, Sinn Féin IRA and cloning double act of Stormont. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is inevitable, because try as they will, they can't bring the unionist community with them, because you are not stupid. We are not buttoned up the back. And confuse the people they may have done with all the bold claims. Treason and treachery together, it was always going to fall apart. And the DUP pro-deal cabal had their moment. They mocked us and derided us. On the day the DUP enthroned Sinn Féin IRA at Stormont, who is the only man the DUP could bring? And by the way, sitting in the gallery was some of the most wicked IRA terrorists in the course of the conflict or troubles. The IRA terrorist campaign, more accurately, who bombed and butchered our community. Who did the DUP find the time to attack? That man, not the IRA. But by the way, the man who told the truth, the man who was described as a dead-end unionist for telling the truth, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to be with him in this day. And the DUP cabal have had their moment, now it's ours. Yes. And make no mistake about it, we are going to dismantle every manifestation of the rotten Donaldson deal, and there will be no compromise on that. And one thing you may find out about me and about Jim and Kate and Ben, and some people may criticise us for us, when we say we're not for turning, we actually mean we're not for turning. We actually mean we're not going to change our mind. The greatest compliment I ever heard this man being paid, even though the speaker of the commentary meant it as an insult, was Alex Keane, that great fountain of wisdom, said that Jim Allister had changed his mind on nothing in his whole political career. Well, I hope that in 40 years' time somebody will say I changed my mind on nothing either, because that's the mark of a principled unionist. Ladies and gentlemen, as we come once more to the summer months with the sound of the Irish Orange flute in the air and the beat of the drum hopefully stirring our hearts, the spirit of defiance, which cries out no surrender, will not be dampened, but it will grow ever stronger. And that spirit may, just like 2021, lead us back to the streets once more, and let us remember the experts, the commentariat, the media in January, February, March 2021 said, oh, there's no protests, nobody cares. Then all of a sudden, a couple of miles down the road, more than 3,000 people in Newtownards. Thereafter, more than 10,000 people in Market Hill, 5,000 people on the Shankill Road. And then they pretended to be surprised. Where did this come from, they said. We didn't see it coming, they lamented. Well, we saw it coming, and we're coming again. The Donaldson deal is finished. It's the inevitable outcome, and we can get there the easy way, or we can get there the hard way. But rest assured, the DUP, we're going to get there. And I hope the pro-deal DUP cabal take the easy way. But if they don't, we'll be there all the way for the hard way too. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.